participants. My name is Dr. Sadaf Siddiqui. I'm Assistant Professor in the Department of English, SS Khanna Girls Degree College. And I take this privilege today on behalf of the Department of English, SS Khanna Girls Degree College, to welcome you all today to today's international webinar on exploring the paradigm shifts in world literatures. This webinar is an endeavor on our part to deliberate, discuss, and disseminate the recent developments in world literatures in contemporary times and to locate the trajectory of current trends. In today's webinar, we are fortunate to have the presence of two distinguished personalities, Dr. Kian Pishkar, Head of Department of English, Literature and Language, Islamic Azad University, Iran, and Professor Vibha Maurya, Department of Germanic and Romance Studies, University of Delhi, to provide their perspectives on the topic. Dear participants, I have a small request to make. Kindly keep yourself muted. And if you have any queries, questions during the presentation, you can type that in the chat box. Q&A session, question and answer session, will be conducted after both the presentations, so you can wait for that. And a feedback form shall be shared after tomorrow's, that is 7th September session. And I request you all to fill in those feedback forms for the certificates. Now, moving on. I would like to invite our Vice Principal, Dr. Neja Sachdev, Associate Professor, Convener of Department of English, SS Khanna Girls Degree College, to accord a genial welcome to our esteemed panelists. Ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Sadaf Siddiqui. A very good morning to all of you present out here. Let me just quote a few lines. Dream of a better life. Don't dream of a better tomorrow. You will keep your present at bay. Live for a moment and have a positive say. You are the best. Say it today. Do what you feel and feel that today. Not like any other day. Feel like today. So with these feelings, I'm extremely honored and feel privileged to have been given this opportunity to address this August gathering on this auspicious occasion of the international webinar on our motto to hold such webinars with such renowned personalities like Dr. Kian Pishkar, Professor Ilham Hussain, Professor Vibha Maurya, and Dr. Priyanka Tripathi is to encourage students to participate as well as to gain more knowledge and grow up to achieve success that will help in contributing for the betterment of the society. This platform is an opportunity to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Kian Pishkar, who is the head of the Department of English Literature and Language, Islamic Azad University, Iran, and who readily gave his consent and was ready to speak on the topic Post-Humanism and Feminist Theory. I feel really obliged to Sir for giving his consent and sparing his valuable time to be here with us and to share his views on this particular topic. And I'm sure we all will be encouraged, enlightened, and motivated by his lecture. But before I cordially welcome him, I would like to welcome our principal, Dr. Lalima Singh, who has been the backbone of this college and who keeps us encouraging in participating as well as organizing such types of activities in the college. Next, I would like to welcome our another convener, Dr. Ruchi Malviya, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, who is here with us, as well as our organizing secretary, Dr. Riya Mukherjee and Dr. Sadaf Siddiqui, who are also from the Department of English, SS Khanna Girls Degree College. I would like to welcome my dear colleagues, as well as my dear students who are very much the part and parcel of this particular webinar. And but I have just learned that Dr. Vibha Maurya is also here with us. So a very, very, very cordial welcome to you here to be with us. And now I will give a chance to Dr. Riya Mukherjee to throw light upon the theme of the subject. Dr. Riya.
Thank you, ma'am, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to this two-day international webinar on exploring the paradigm shifts of world literature. Literature is a powerful medium that unites us across time and space. The ever-evolving human story is beautifully captured by literature. It adds voices to the timeless and universal themes. This universality that we witness in literature is, however, adaptable. It changes as per the situation of the society. The pandemic that we are facing is just one example of such a force that shapes and changes literature. This adaptability of literature manifests itself not only in the birth of numerous new genres, but also in the innovative approaches and praxis, creating in the process a necessity of understanding and comprehending the paradigms that shape literature and also affects our understanding of it. Today, we'll take this opportunity to understand those paradigmatic changes, the forces that influence those paradigmatic changes, and help us adapt to these new literatures that we see in the horizon. I would now request Dr. Sadaf Siddiqui to carry on with the program.
Thank you, Ria. Now moving on, I would like to invite again Dr. Nija Sachdev to introduce our first speaker, Professor Kian Pishkar. Ma'am.
Thank you, Sadaf. I extend my warm welcome to Dr. Kian Pishkar, who is the most distinguished and versatile writer. And as we've already told, that he's a lecturer and an academic member of postgraduate Department of English Language and Literature, Islamic Azad University, Jiroft Branch, Kerman Province, Iran. And more than this, he is the head of the postgraduate department, MA and PhD, English Language and Literature. He is the head of Young Researchers and Talented Students Club, Vice President of Research and Technology in IAU Jiroft Branch, Head of Research Committee in IAU Jiroft Branch, Head of Research Ethics Committee in IAU Jiroft Branch, as well as the Head of Publication Committee in IAU Jiroft Branch. He has done his PhD on teaching of English language, University of Isfahan, and he has done his MA and BA from Islamic Azad University, Karaj Branch, Iran. And he has been in 2016, he has been a top researcher of Kerman Province. In 2016, he has been a top writer of International Siraj Book Fair. In 2013, he has been the top researcher of IAU Jiroft Branch, and 2021 top researcher of Kerman Province. And more than that, I would also like to tell you that he has been a keynote speaker in many of the international virtual conferences of 2020-2021. And more than that, he has many books to his credits, an umpteen number of books like Guide to English Literature, Oral Translation, Renan Press, Tehran, Preparation Course for MA of English Literature, Renan Press, Translation of Glossary of Literary Terms, Guide to Practical English Literary Analysis, Collection of Tests of MA Examination of English Literature, A Touch with English, Renan Press, and Guide to Practical English Literary Analysis, Guide to English Literature, as well as English and You, Renan Press, English, Renan Press, Reader's Practical Analysis of Modern English and American Poetry, Reader's Practical Analysis of Modern English and American Drama, Reader's Practical Analysis of Modern English and American Short Story, Reader's Guide to Modern Practical English and American Literary Analysis, Novel Drama Poetry, English for Islamic Theology, and Modern English and American Literature in a nutshell. So you can imagine how versatile this writer is, because he is not only well-versed in English language and literature, but also in American literature, as well as in American Indian literature and postmodern literature. And before I invite him to present his lecture, I would just like to say that Originality is the essence of true scholarship, and creativity is the soul of a true scholar. And Dr. Kian Pishkar is definitely a true scholar. Welcome you, sir. Now, sir, I cordially invite you to begin your lecture, sir. Dr. Kian Pishkar.
Thank you, dear professor. Good morning for everybody. It's a great honor that I again present a new subject for your students and for your colleagues. This topic is about the post-humanism and feminist theory we can find in new modern and postmodern American and English literature, especially, of course, American literature, especially in the science fiction based literature. If we want to define the post-human theory focus, we can say that through critical and creative categories on the margin expression and unrealized possibilities that always overcome both anthropocentrism and the issues that we can find over the 30 last years based on the science fiction literature, and as I said, especially American literature, as the core of the theoretical innovation of humanism. If we want to know what's the meaning of the post-humanism, we should first know that what was the end and aim of the humanism, and how they called themselves, and how they blended and mixed and connected with the feminist and queer studies. In this post-feminism, we have raised post-colonial sublateral studies alongside, especially the most important thing that we have is the cultural studies, films, television, and media studies. And it is a kind of the portraits of the radical epistemology that we have in humanism. And in this structure, we always consider not humanism, just man. There is no female, no male, but we just consider human beings and man. Another crucial generative transdisciplinary that we have in these studies is the science and technology studies, because we are going to speak about the cyber, about the technology, about the modern societies, about any kind of the invaders that we have from other planets, and all of them comes in the modern literature and in these post-human structures that we are going to have. And all of them need that you should need that we consider all of the sciences, all of the disabilities, all of the medias, all of the mediums and contexts that we can speak about them in the modern form, of course, modern literature. And you should consider that all of them based on our traditions and our cultures. If you consider that in China, in India, in Persian literature, we don't have so many science fiction because we have traditions, culture. But in the United States, because we don't have any kind of the tradition, just because the American roots is just 300 years. Because of this, they don't have any tradition, any customs, and any rituals. They are going to make something for themselves. And these ideas in these frames and patterns comes by cyber, by technology, and it is very good. It shows that we can have new studies on new forms because of the human beings advance in modern life. So it is not disadvantage for American literature. Sometimes we can say it is a kind of advantage because it is new point, new angle for studying and presenting new ideas. If we consider feminist and cultural points that we have connected with the post-humanism, we should consider some special points, special issues and matters. The first is that we should consider feminist research have been key agents in making and doing of the cultural studies. You cannot, a society without females, without feminism, without being isolated ladies or women. So we can consider women and females equal with the culture of that society, that they convey from one generation to another generation. And these cultural studies can come according to science and technology. As I said, that if we want to speak about the cyber and new generation and any kind of the problems that we have in societies that have been reflected in the modern American novels. And these cultural studies are technoscience, means that different things may involve different activities. 5 different Anglo-American disciplinary and interdisciplinary roots and results are, as I say, the first one is cultural anthropology. Everything based on the culture, everything based on technology, everything based on tradition and customs, that rituals that we have. The second one is literary studies of the science. It is new studies, because of before this era, before this period, we don't have any kind of the technology that have been reflected in the modern literature. The third issue is studies of the visual culture. Most of the people, just now because of the virtual situation, virtual media that we have in modern form, for example, Instagram, WhatsApp, or other media, social medias that we have, they consider they don't have time for studying. They want to have something for just as a visual ones. Because of this, it is a new progress in modern literature. And after that, if you consider British cultural studies as a root of American literature, and the last one, feminist science fiction studies. This use of disciplinary and interdisciplinary labors, tracking devices. It is a kind of the tracking devices seems appropriate and convenient, since it helps denaturalize. When we speak about the postmodern, when we speak about technology, when we speak about the cyber, that time we should remember and keep in mind that this is based on the denaturalization. Means that we haven't the human beings. Just that time we may have just robots. We have new missions, new technology for maybe for helping to humanity, or maybe misusing of the humanity. And all of them, as I said, based on the cultural studies and technical science studies that are inherently transdisciplinary. Most of the feminist scholars were vanguard in the new branch of the anthropological. When we want to combine these structures, mean that post-humanity and feminism, because it is we always consider females or women as a root for having new generation. If we don't have any women, if we don't have any female, we don't have new generation. Means that it will be uprooted, will be degenerated. Because of this, feminist scholars have adopted 2 key anthropological, methodological, and theoretical tradition in the investigate science and technology in the Western culture. Because in the Eastern culture, we have so great respect for our mothers, for our sisters, for our ladies, okay? But in the Western societies, Occidental ladies maybe have this problem. Because of this, maybe the feminist movement started from West, not from East, because always we respected, most of the time in most of the Eastern societies, the females has a great and very high position in the society. This strand of the feminist culture studies undertook the investigation of the, as I said, the ritual and practices instincted by integral to technosciences. that all of them will be connected to post-humanity and science and technology. The studies, all, as I said, feminist studies, I mean, share a number of theoretical premises. They criticize the idea of the human implicitly upheld academic humanities on two grounds: structural anthropocentrism on the hand of inbuilt Eurocentrism, I mean. When we speak about the Eurocentrism, it means that all of these roots, all of these changes, most of them, of course, came from European countries. And after that, we had American countries, of course, and United States. In that part, it fixed. And after this fixation and after these fixing structures about the feminism, they started to have institutional protocols of academic principles about the feminism. And they consider this feminism is not as a modern issue, but it is as a vital issue, I mean, that in the first wave, second wave, and third wave of the movement about feminism, this philosophy of the theory and culture in the society and out of society emerged. And after this emerging of this idea about feminism based on the new ideas, new demands in the society, it's not matter, it was about the just political, social, racial, financial rights, or about just became independent creature and completely isolated from the men. That time, the word became word of the knowledge and production practices in this period. After all of the waves that we had about feminism. Second, they are firmly grounded in present and actual virtual means that they take real life events seriously, by extension, take power seriously. In most of the countries just now, we have prime ministers that are ladies. So, or maybe presidents are ladies. It shows that we have new emergence, new appearance, and new movement, especially in the political and cultural-based structures that in the societies, in all of the countries, in not one country. The crucial question about post-humanism and feminism are these. If we want to present some special questions for on what basis we are going to study this post-humanity and feminism, we should say that present these four questions. The first one is, what can be feminist political stand in relation to productive paradoxes engendered by post-human conditions? Where is the ladies' position in this post-humanity? Are the same? Is it better or it is lower? Okay, we should consider this one. The second is, to what extent does convergence of the post-humanistic and post-anthropocentric perspective complicate the issue of the human agency and feminist political subjectivity? This subjectivity, especially political subjectivity, just now is one of the most important issue and subject for any kind of the social object, social protest, and any kind of the social demands that we have for feminist movements. The third one is, what happened to gender identities? What happens to gender identities if sexuality is not based on the oppositional terms? If we don't have female or male, if we don't have any kind of identity about our sexuality, about our gender, what will happen? Just like vampires, if you have seen so many, we have so many movies and films about these matters, that most of the vampires, when come alive and stand again, and they come to society, when they exposed to heat, they are free to choose their own sexuality. They can be male or female, okay? So this sexual identity and sexual characteristics is one of the most important questions about this matter. If we don't have any female, or if we don't have any male in our society, how we can define this positional terms? Is it possible? Without darkness, without blackness, how we can define the whiteness? We should all of them be beside each other to be meaningful. And if we want to have this, the meaning and concepts understandable. The last question that we should ask about the post-humanity and feminism is that what happens when there is sexuality but without possibility of the either heterosexual or homosexual union? So if we don't have this kind of union, what will happen? We have this kind of gender-based identity, sexual-based identity. So if we consider again sexual and gender-based identity, then sexuality is not theorized as caught in the sex-gender binary. It enjoys more transversal structure and wider connotations, excuse me. Sexuality as a life force provides non-essential ontological structure for organizational human activity. Most of the time we use these identities about a man or female. Just we want to have a kind of ontological structure. We want to have a global meaning, global concept. We want to solve the problem about activity and desire. And this activity, affectivity, and desire can be solved with the meanings that we conventionally have considered for ourselves, for female and male. So if we put aside them, we don't have any other issue for a challenge, for debate about them. And maybe that time we have a kind of the vacuum in our society. Now, for about we can challenge. If we don't have any kind of the sexual and gender-based identity, that time, what will be meaning of the first, second, and third wave of the feminism? So we should consider that sexuality does get caught in the gender captive mechanism. Because of this, I say that if we put aside them, if we can consider it as a new theory in our societies, and we can have more papers about them. If we consider all of humanity without sexual identity, what will happen? In modern world, all of the men and women can teach, can be doctor, can be astronaut, can be president. And now, if we put aside all of the borders between gender and sexuality, what will happen? This post-humanity speaks about this matter, that if we put aside all of these borders, that time we have no challenge. We may be having more modern and better society without any challenge, without new needs to have a fourth wave of the feminism or other movement about the feminist rights. Another post-anthropocentric feminism advocate vision of the body as a sexuality pre-constituted dynamic, a bundle of relation to explore transformative potential different concept of political. And so, as I said, most of the time we consider this matter, we don't want to solve this problem. We want to always have a kind of the challenge, a kind of a challenge for humanity. if we suppose that if we don't have this kind of social challenge, that time we will live in vacuum. We don't have anything for objecting, protesting. We don't have anything for going for rally or demonstration. Okay, so I suppose post-humanity tries to solve this problem of the border of the gender, border of the sexuality and identity that we can have about sexuality. Another definition that we can have about post-humanism is the term that at least 7 definitions, according to Fernando, we have. The first is anti-humanism. Some of the peoples, if you consider, for example, Hitler, we can consider him as an anti-humanism because it is crucial to that we consider him as somebody who demolished humanity. And maybe some of the critics says no. He tried to have a new definition about the humanity with new patterns and frames. So it is some spatial structures and spatial ideas that everybody can have in their own mind about humanity, about post-humanity, and about anti-humanism. Something like in our literatures, we have heroes and anti-hero, and we always have a challenge about the definition of these concepts. So cultural post-humanism is a branch of the cultural theory that critical foundation of assumption of the humanism that examines and questions historical notion of human nature. And this human nature is so important because in post-humanity, some of the people, some of the critics, some of the writers, as I said, according to theory of the cyborg, they try to denaturalize, degeneralize, and dehumanize, okay? We should consider all of these structure and concepts. One of the most important elements here is a circle of the moral concern and extending of the subjectivity between beyond human species. Post-human condition and the construction and human condition by critical theorists always tries to indicate that post-humanism and transhumanism are a kind of the ideology and movement which seeks to develop and make available technologies. And this technology is so important because based on this technology, modern world, and based off this internet, based on the new facilities that we have in our connections, we have a new and modern era and period in the world. And now I believe that we have passed from period and era of the information, and we just now enter to new era that we can call it era of the combination of the technology, humanity, information, and other structures that all of them combine to each other. And you cannot find any kind of the issue just now that you can separate its elements from each other. For example, you cannot separate technology from our life. You cannot separate and put aside culture, politics, and cyber from our life. Everything are connected to each other. And in this postmodern era that we can call it era of the combination of the information, technology, science, culture, politics, everything with each other, we want to have a kind of the physical and psychological capacities in order to achieve post-human future. We should know, we should find what will be the future for humanity. Some philosopher, I suppose one of them is including, for example, Nick Land, promote this view that humans should embrace and accept their eventual times. This is related to new view about the globe which universality, which supports building of the strong artificial intelligence that we need in our societies for showing the end of the humanity. And if we don't have this one, we cannot seek for post-human future that in this case is future without humans, just robots, just technologies, just machines without any kind of humanity. Michel Foucault placed post-humanism within the context of the differentiated humanism from Enlightenment thought, and according to him, as a post-structural critics, as you know that he was a great French philosopher and critic, two existed in state of tension as a humanism thought to establish norms, while Enlightenment thought attempt to transit all of its material, including boundaries that are constructed by humanistic thought. Drawing on the Enlightenment changes to boundaries of humanism, and post-humanism reject various assumptions that human dogmas, but also examining those discourses to uncover inherent humanistic, anthropocentric, normative notion of the humans and concepts of human. If we consider post-anthropocentric feminist theory, one of the grounds, that firm grounds for it, is contesting the arrogance of this structure and with the theory and idea of the exceptionalism of human as a transcendental category. We always consider that human is exceptional because we can speak, we can write, we can do so many things, we can invent more technologies, we can change society, we can have an effect on environment and ecosystems, we can remove something, we can create something. So because of this, as Foucault said, and Foucault believed that we are exceptional in humanism. And this transcendent category is also confronted with some critical issues, of course. If we consider notably human agency in ethical political terms, this perspective involves, in fact, both methodological and, again, political consequences. You cannot find any society without political context. Because of this, in most of the modern criticism, maybe we have a kind of the new return to Marxism and social criticism that involves some elements that all characteristics, all elements, all factors that are connected with us should be studied according to new political situation that we have, new globalism, new universalities that we have. Because of this, political strategy of the post-structuralism embarrasses monism and vitalist ontologies. This postmodern theory, while consider relying on a certain extent on social constructive method, if we don't have special this intelligence, this smartness of the humanity will be removed and demolished. If we don't have this ability to use them, that time the subject in the process of the subjectivism and all of them in modern and postmodern societies have been determined by political issues, not by traditional and custom-based elements. Foucault has another interesting theory and issue about the death of man. You know that Nietzsche has a theory of the death of God, but Foucault believes that we have God or not, does not matter. Now we don't have any man as a humanity, of course, not about a man or woman. We speak about the death of man, means that destroying, demolishing, vanishing of the humanity, that he formalized an epistemological moral crisis that went beyond binary opposition, cutting across the different poles and political spectrum. These post-structural theorists believe that insubordination from received humanist ideas, and this ideality, they targeted the humanistic arrogance, continuing to place man at the center of the world of history, and implicit assumptions that what is human about humanity is connected to sovereignty of the reason. What's the reason for having of the humanity and enlightenment-based rationality? Why we have this? Why we should follow these issues and perspectives? Because of this, the subject of the European thought as a unitary. It is so important that the European thought as a unitary is a kind of a sign to humanity to put him in a royal place, in central place, in the center of the globe and universe, as a motor of the human history. And if we can do this, that time we don't have the idea and the issue of the death of man. But if we don't have we cannot solve this problem. At the future, we will encounter, we will face with this death of man without any identity. And if there is a man or humanity, that time the man and humanity will not have any kind of the identity. That time we will have just a code, because the cyborgs will dominate, will govern on us. So that time we can evidently and obviously be witness for death of man without any identity, without any characteristics and personality. That time we should search not for feminist theory, not for the different waves of the feminism or the different waves of the other movements, social movement. That time we should should search for new identity. And this new identity will be based on post-humanity, because that time we haven't any kind of identity and we will live in the vacuum of the identity in future. Post-structural feminist philosophers were most of the time considered as an anti-humanism, in that they critic from within our unitary identities. This identity is so important because when we study feminism, the sociology, post-humanity, in all of them, based on the culture and structure, culture and politics that we have in our society, we try to find new identity. And these new identities always present us as a man, as a human. And if we don't have this identity, that time we haven't any kind of the ability for connecting with each other, how we can call each other, how we can have a connection with each other. That time, because it is a kind of the death for humanity. So this identity predicted upon the Phallogocentric and Eurocentric white supremacist and standardized view that what constitutes the human ideal man. Again, we should come back to past, and we should make new myths and mythology, and we should find new heroes. For example, in German, Siegfried; in Iran, Rostam; in India, we should find Mahabharat and other ones. So we need new heroes. If we don't have this standardized, that time we will have problem of the identity. They argue that it is impossible to speak in one unified voice. It is impossible. We speak in one unified voice about the women and feminism, indigenous people, and other marginal subjects, because in most of the time we consider our literature, especially the postmodern American literature, and especially in the Black literature in the United States, we consider females as a marginalized. We consider them as other ones. And because of this, they try to find new identity in their social position that they have any kind of the performance. Another matter that it is connected with the post-humanity is the naturalizing difference. When we have a naturalized, we haven't any problem. Female and male are in their own natural rule. They act, they have a connection with each other. They try to have a normal relationship with each other, and they haven't any problem. And when we speak about denaturalizing, that time we should consider race and sex and gender. If we denaturalize humanity, that time because of this, most of the time in most of the countries we have lesbians, gays, and other ones, heterosexual or homosexuals and other ones. So we should consider this denaturalization as one of the biological or physical traits. In modern and postmodern literature, post-humanity try to solve this matter, that we should consider primordial view. Feminist theories conceptualize race and sex as a political constructs, and building on the insights from the critical race theory, post-colonial theory, and sustain the national borders. In contrast to this presumption that race and sex are apart from each other, are given aspects of a human existence, such a political and ahistorical feminist scholarship, century and 19th century. Biology was used to create allegedly empirical justification for racial and sexual identities. And we should consider this matter when the language of political equality. It is so important we should consider that all of the waves, all of the movements, all of the social protests and objections in the societies from males or females, does not matter. All of them try to find a kind of the language of the political equality, and was deployed that against other issues that we have in society that they govern, and we consider them as a barrier for this kind of the equality, language equality. Linda Arkoff has pointed feminist theory reject that notion of the unknowns are fungible and interchangeable. When this interchangeability happens, we can have a new relationship with our issues, our ideas about especially postmodern American literature, and especially about Black literature that we have, and they can relevant judgment calls about issue of coherence, consistency, relevance, plausibility, and credibility. Remember that,
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. Sir, please try to wind up. We have paucity of time for the other speaker also.
okay,
Please wind up in 5 minutes, sir.
5 minutes, okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
In the post-humanity, we consider sex and race are, as I said, political categories that have often accorded legal status, educational and employment, opportunity levels that based on the income and wealth, access to prestigious and power that all of us try to find it. In the post-humanity, this wealth, this income, this access to prestige comes from the new technologies and science that we have. And based on these technologies, we try to have more and more convenience. We want to have more freedom. And this can cause that modern human beings creates more cyborgs and put aside identities that we have about the sexuality and the race. And if you consider affixes to birth of the certificates, all of the issues that will have in future, any kind of the issues, any kind of the documents, just something, for example, birth certificates, passport, driver license, draft cards, credit application, marriage license, all of them will base race, sex, legal status, scarps, the contents and individual freedom and belonging in ways that ensure domination and subordination of the political ideas that helps and incorporates to progress of post-humanity and cyber and science technology. A new post-humanism cannot attempt to give absolute foundational account of the human nature and the structures that we have. All of them try to indicate that science fiction authors and presented and try to indicate new ideas that we have in the structures that we have, technology and science that we have, in dramatized enlightenment ideas about ultimate that happens after World War II, inspired by cognitive and science computational, of course, computational technologies. And this post-human species, even by their purpose, very different models of enhanced. It is so important that we consider these models of enhanced or augmented bodies that we have in our structures and about our issues that we have in our societies. As a last subject that I want to say, because of the shortage of the time, Harvey represents generic feminism humanity. It is so important, the Cyborg study, that Cyborg answers question of how feminism reconcile radical historical specificity of their embodied experience. In this part, Harvey tries to completely combine and blend feminist and post-humanity with the cyber science and technology, and both of them are a kind of the post-anthropocentric and post-metaphysical construct that offers new political ontology. This political ontology taking into constructing ecologically accountable feminist classless, it is so important, classless, sex exaggeration, and anti-racist society. Thank you. Thank you. I'm at your service.
Thank you so much, sir, for providing an insight on this complex issue in such a lucid and simple way. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you. It was a great honor. Thank you.
Now, I request again Dr. Nija Sachdev to introduce our next speaker, Professor Vibha Maurya. Ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody now, and a very, very warm welcome to Dr. Vibha Maurya, who's a senior professor of Hispanic Studies in the Department of Germanic and Romance Studies, University of Delhi. She has taught Spanish language and Spanish and Latin American literature in the university for more than 4 decades. She has carried out indefatigable work for the development and expansion of Hispanic studies, not only in her university, but in other centers and universities of India. Apart from this, she has been constantly engaged in research work by publishing articles in Indian and foreign journals. She has edited several books and has translated into Hindi, Spanish, and Latin American narratives and poetry. Her major contribution is the first ever direct translation into Hindi of the great masterpiece of world literature, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. She was awarded the Pablo Neruda Presidential Medal of Honor of the government of Chile on the occasion of the birth centenary celebrations of Pablo Neruda, poet and Nobel laureate in 2004, and in June 2010, she was elected to the Spanish Royal Academy as corresponding member in India. She was elected to the Executive Committee of the International Association of Cervantistas in Oviedo in 2012. She has a large body of research and scientific work on Cervantes and Don Quixote. Vibha Maurya was born in the sacred city of Allahabad, India in 1952. On finishing her school education in India, she traveled around Europe with her parents and continued her higher education there. She has masters in Hispanic philology and completed her doctorate from the University of Havana, Cuba in 1986. She has been invited as visiting professor to the University of Navarra, University of Valencia, and Council of Historical Research in Seville, Freie Universitat, Berlin, and La Universidad de Desarrollo, Santiago de Chile. She recently retired as professor from University of Delhi and continues to be engaged in lecturing and researching in Hispanic studies. And we are very, very happy to have you here, Vibha ma'am, because, we are also very proud to know that you have done so much of research work as well as has written so much work done in Hispanic studies, which is a rare case. And I'm sure you are also well versed with Spanish language. And here we will be delighted to hear you. And please welcome and be with us. Thank you. Dr. Vibha, we invite you to begin your lecture. I'm sure you're going to enlighten the students.
I want to unmute myself and I don't know how to make my screen bigger so that I become.
But you are visible, ma'am.
I'm visible and I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First of
So
all,
nice
I
to have
will
you.
tell you that I consider this invitation as my great honor to speak before you. I am born in Allahabad and I have studied in Allahabad University. Unfortunately, I could not complete my studies there because I went abroad. And after leaving Allahabad, I just changed completely my field of studies. I became a Hispanic scholar. I studied Spanish, and then for last 50 years, 45 years, I taught in Delhi University, and almost 5 years, I studied Spanish. So my relationship with Spanish is for almost 50 years. And in Delhi University, and I am a fortunately recognized Indian scholar in Hispanic studies. That's why the King of Spain has appointed me as the member of the Royal Academy, which is perhaps the highest honor that a country can give to a specialist. And I'm really honored. I'm so grateful to Dr. Lalima Singh, to the conveners, Dr. Malviya and Dr. Sachdev, and to Riya Mukherjee and Siddiqui, Dr. Siddiqui, because it's really, I'm emotionally charged today because I'm speaking before an audience for the first time after working for 50 years. For the first time, I am addressing an audience in Allahabad. It's my dearest city. I've traveled widely, but Allahabad is like in my heart. And that's what I was telling also Dr. Malviya. So it's really an honor. And secondly, I want to say that I have completely stuck to the topic, what is exploring the paradigm shifts in world literature. I have not selected any other theme. I'm going to stick to this topic, and I'll try and trace in my own way, which is absolutely different than what Dr. Pishkar has just presented. I'm going to speak, of course, I have my perspective from Hispanic studies, but I'm also, because of Hispanic studies and because of being an Indian, I think I have the advantage of having a view of also world literature. And I have also an MA in Russian studies, Russian language. So you can imagine that I've read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy in the original, although I've forgotten most of my Russian now because I became a Hispanist. So this is my personal introduction, and once again, a lot of thanks to all of you for inviting me.
Ma'am, it's an honor to have you with us. It's really an honor for us.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
what I want to tell you is that I'm going to look at right from the beginning. I mean, let's start from the beginning. And I knew that I'm going to address the students, so I have kept my sort of also talk in a little bit in a simpler way. So I want to start from the beginning. And it is that in 1492, when Christopher Columbus left Spanish shores and navigated and reached accidentally the Americas. I say accidentally because all of you must be knowing that he set out to look for India, a shorter route to India, but he landed up in Americas. That opened absolutely new world for the entire humankind, because this event marked an unforeseen and unheard change, not only in the world history, but in the world geography. Because imagine an entire continent, a whole chunk of land which existed but was unknown to humankind, was added to our planet Earth. And from there starts what we call now, what the modern world is. And now, of course, Professor Pishkar has talked about the postmodern also. So what I want to say is that these changes, these drastic changes, do not limit itself only to the 16th and the 17th century, because 1492 means end of 15th century and early 16th century. But their spatial or their geographical or their territorial expansion and political advancement went on almost until the late 19th century. First Spain and Portugal, because Portugal was there also in Goa, and then other European countries like England, France, Netherlands, Italy, and Germany. They started the invasion and occupied vast territory of the globe. This relentless act of transformation, the political, economic, social, and cultural transformation, completely changed the character of the world. And now, by early, say, 19th century, or let us say by 1915 or 1914, the First World War, most of the world saw the predominance of European or Western civilization. We must also note that this huge geographical expansion was accompanied by the desire of each of these countries to increase their power and prestige in the world. So there was rivalries between these powers also, the colonizing powers also. And they wanted to morally justify their act by preaching that they were carrying out a civilizing mission and teach the barbarous, and don't forget that barbarous were we, barbarous people of the world some rules and some order. This ultimately led to preventing us, the colonized people, from developing into nations or societies that we would have liked to be. Because when they came and they occupied us, all our rights were taken away and we didn't know we were supposed to only be like them. So however, the question that we may ask today is, what did the colonizers or the European powers leave behind after we achieved our independence? And an African leader of freedom struggle has metaphorically said it very nicely, and I'll quote, the dish that new leaders were handed down to the leaders of the independence was old, cracked, and little fit to any further use. Worse than that, it was not an empty dish. In fact, it had carried the junk and the jumble of the colonial muddle and make do. Its supposedly golden surface was not the reflection of new ideas and the ways of liberation, but the shadows of old ideas and ways of servitude. So that's what the colonizers left behind when they gave us independence. This shows how the European civilizing mission was nothing more than a process wherein we were asked to imitate them. Colonial culture should simply copy the occupiers. That was their mission. But as we know, there was nothing to copy because we had this old junk dish. And they looked at us as marginal and inferior lots, people without history, people without knowledge. Therefore, even while resisting and launching our struggle, they expected us to appropriate and copy their strategies. This way, we land up in replacing one tyranny or one cruel ruler by another, which would be a local one. This way, we land up in this way, we must note that any struggle of resistance cannot give fruits of success until we invent or we create our own, and not be only the imitative defender. It must be also said clearly that European colonization of the world bore disastrous consequences for the colonies. Our economy, our culture, and our politics was completely downgraded. Even then, through their freedom and independence, the colonized people, we showed that our capacity to win and transform cannot be crushed by any foreign invader. Here, I am not, this is not the place, and here I am not to discuss the politics of the freedom struggle, because our interest lies in examining the cultural and artistic creations as much as the period of our struggle, that means during the colonization, as when we became independent. It is so aimed, I have aimed it so because creative artists like the writers, the performing artists, the painters, the filmmakers, the sculptors, the architects express more powerfully the vision of a society in the process of building itself. The cultural activists take over the charge of representing and giving concrete form to the ideological concepts as well as aspirations of a free society. Through the means of language or writings or visual arts or architecture or paintings, they clearly capture the transformations taking place in the newly liberated country. This is what a post-colonial society or cultural activist of a post-colonial country are engaged in. In this part of my talk, I shall focus precisely on how the post-colonial subject or post-colonial people of a free country adapt a new reality and reinvent their arts and discourse. we can take their experiences as model of struggle to establish themselves as nation and culture and examine how they engage locally and globally with other cultural productions and dialogue with them. And this, I think, should be considered as the first paradigm shift in the discourse of world literature. Because from colonization, from being under occupation, we became free country and we became like the post-colonial people. But there is a problem in that term also, which I'll discuss later. But let us first turn to how this term paradigm shift comes into being. And this comes from the scientific theory of paradigms you must have read. Thomas Samuel Kuhn, American philosopher of science, in his book, which he wrote in 1962, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, talks about it for the first time. According to him, the paradigm shift is a fundamental change, is the basic change which happens in our assumption, in our thinking of, in our assumption of things or the concepts. When some problem or some anomalies occur, and a universally accepted paradigm is not able to explain that problem, then there are ways of, or there is search for looking for other means. It is then what happens that it completely transforms the way we are looking at things or we are examining the things. It is a shift which is not just different, but it is a better shift. And since people think that we have the paradigm shift is better and it's explaining us better the contemporary reality, so they decide to follow this shift. So when the paradigm shifts happen, there are followers who make the sort of spread the word or make the discussion more lively, and there is a settling down of this paradigm. In humanities and social science, though it was born in the field of science, exact science, but the humanities and social sciences also adopt this process, as we can see in we will see in the discussion on post-colonial or post-colonial discourses. Post-colonial studies were developed with a view to address the cultural production of those societies that were affected by colonization. The term or the word post-colonial has multiple usage. Employed by historians and political scientists after the Second World War, it was used by them for pointing out the post-colonial state, in the sense post-colonial had created, which came after gaining the independence or after the colonizers left us. So they gave it a chronological kind of aspect to it, added to it, or chronological element added to it. So initially, when post-colonial studies were happening, it was always taken as something which came after the colonizers went away. However, by the late 1970s, the term has been used by literary critics to discuss various cultural effects of colonization. The study of colonial representation was initiated by the Palestinian scholar Edward Said in his book, a landmark book we can say, on entitled Orientalism, which he wrote in 1978. And later it evolved into what was called the colonial discourse theory, for which we can thank Gayatri Spivak or Homi Bhabha. They are the major proponents of the colonial discourse theory. So, but more common use of this term was first seen referring to cultural interactions within our own societies, colonial societies, and literary circles. But journals brought out special numbers on the post-colonial literature, and this way there was a widespread recognition and acceptance of the term among not only literary critics, but also among other people. That's what I said, when there's a paradigm shift, there are followers. So followers are the one who make it, who settle it. So the term had emerged as part of an attempt to politicize and focus the concerns of the field, such as Commonwealth literature. You remember that we are no more using the term Commonwealth literature, or we are also not using the term Third World literature, because always when the Europeans, we will see it later, so the Europeans is the first world, no? I don't know which is the second world. Perhaps the earlier Soviet Union and all was the second world, and we always are at the bottom of the ladder. So we are the third world. So that term somehow got out of fashion. Commonwealth literature also got out of fashion because but this field, when the politicization of this field happened, of the post-colonial literature, then or the so-called new literature in English. I mean, we are also, of course, talking a lot about the new literature in English because we have a whole lot of Indian English writers. So these terms got merged into what came to be the post-colonial literature or post-colonial discussions, etc. So a term has subsequently been widely used to signify the political, linguistic, and cultural experiences of societies from the former British Empire. I mean, we talk about the former British Empire, and unfortunately, the term post-colonial is even now, I'm a Latin American expert, so I know it very well, that even today it is being used mostly by the colonies or the ex-colonies of the British Empire, whether it is Africa or whether it is Asia. The French colonial, post-colonial, or the Latin American post-colonial are not sort of taken into account. But now, of course, people are, we will see that so many other terms are coming out, and this even post-colonial is perhaps going out of fashion. The post-colonial is used to describe and analyze the cultural production of colonized people and the production that occurs during colonialism. Because when decolonization happens, we cannot forget what happened during the colonization. So you will see that earlier literature which came out, that always referred to the time of colonization. And then we then know the post-colonial analysis will address, and the major exponents have said it, that the culture affected by imperial process. What is post-colonial analysis? Which addresses all the culture affected by the imperial process from the moment of colonizations to the present day. So it does not end in, let's say, in the 60s or 70s, 20, 30, 40 years after the colonizers went away, but till the present day. That means the post-colonial discourse is a discourse of the colonized, which begins with the colonization, but does not end when the colonizers go home. Thus, the post-colonial is not the chronological period, okay? Because till now we cannot say that it is the post-colonial. So it's not a chronological period, but a range of material conditions and the ways of challenging various specific forms of colonial oppression. So this addresses a whole lot of other issues also. Post-colonialism and its theory, according to, as I said, the main exponent is the Bill Ashcroft and his other colleagues who are involved in discussion about this experience, the experience of colonialism in various ways. No, so I will quote from Ashcroft. He says that migration, slavery, oppression, suppression and resistance, race, gender, place, and responses to influential master discourses of imperial Europe like the history, philosophy, and linguistics, and the fundamental experience of speaking and writing by which all this can be done. This all together is covered by the post-colonial literature, unquote. Critically speaking, words such as post-colonial describe how and in what way the experiences have been described. It's not only about talking about, but even expressing it in your own words. And many people say that other people, the Europeans cannot speak about us because they have not gone through these experiences. So when we go through these experiences, we can describe it and we can write about it. So this is what post-colonial should be. It seems that the term post-colonial is, in this manner, if we see, it looks very homogenizing experience. Homogenizing experience of colonialism, for example, because, well, it is the term is homogenizing because it's like, you know, in Africans had the same thing as the Asian, or the Latin Americans had the same thing as the Asian. Overall, the colonial experience is the experience of oppression, of dominating by domination of one country over the other. But experiences are different, because if you see the Caribbeans, for example, what we call the West Indies, we call in India West Indies. The West Indies a different experience. They suffered the slavery. The people were brought from Africa, bought and brought from Africa to work in their plantations, etc. So their experience of colonization was different than our labor market, our labor power was exploited because there was industrialization already. So these are the differences which we can talk about, but overall the experience is very same. So what is post-colonial literature talking about? It is talks about what is the experience of oppression, of invasion, and of domination. These involve various material experience located in specific historical and political environment. And just as the experience of colonization with colonized societies are varied experiences, from the most abject suffering to the resistance and rebellion of the colonized people. I mean, imagine that most of the colonized people had an armed struggle against the colonizers. But what we had ahimsa. No, so our experience of even resistance is different than the experience of other countries. So we had ahimsa, we had Gandhi, we had non-violent form. So that's why we say that the colonial discourse is a system of knowledge of colonized societies, because all these experiences also build our knowledge. Now we are much better off to think about ourselves. So the post-colonial discourse is a system of knowledge of colonized societies, a space for enunciation, in the sense that this is a space from where we can talk, we can say, we can declare our intentions and our views. And also it's a space for rich cultural production. So post-colonial cultural production as well as discourses testify our potential to intervene and to question the power of the imperial state and demand what is our due. So this post-colonial is, again, I mean, it's a political category in the sense that it gives us a whole lot of right, but it is expressed through our cultural actions and cultural productions. Indian subcontinent was ruled by the British for more than 2 centuries. During the colonial rule, cultural life of the natives was deeply disturbed. Many Indians wrote their fictional works in English and came to be known as Indian English writers or Indian English literature. These novels covered such themes as nationalism, racism, caste discrimination, gender discrimination, and cultural identity and migrations. Early exponents of these writings were Bankim Chandra, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. They all wrote in English also. Rabindranath Tagore wrote in English as well as in Bengali. Mulk Raj Anand, you know, he always wrote in English. Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan wrote always in English. And later in the 70s and 80s, the writers like Salman Rushdie or Rohington Mistry or Amitav Ghosh or Vikram Seth, and women writers like Anita Desai and Tara Sehgal or Arundhati Roy even, we can say, are the post-colonial writers. Rushdie's Midnight Children, I mean, a path-breaking work as far as the post-colonialism is concerned, is narrated by Salim Sinai, who is the main protagonist and represents new class of Indian youth of independent India. The protagonist possesses some magical power. You remember, I don't know if you have read, And through those through his persona, the writer explores many themes, subject matter of ardent discussion at that time, like the nationalism, partition, realism, politics in the free India, social issues, etc. Here, in a situation of post-independent India, the growth of every individual Indian is equated with the development and growth of the nation. That means the protagonists who were the heroes of the novels were so constructed, their character was so constructed that it almost represented how the independent Indian society was growing or not growing. Whereas the women writers touched upon the themes of poverty, alienation, isolation, and dejection. Anita Desai's, for example, I mean, it's an old novel, perhaps one of her first novels. In 1963, she wrote it. Anita Desai's Cry the Peacock is a story of the protagonist Maya, and she expresses Maya's agony, alienation, representing perhaps the plight of the entire womanhood in India. Early post-colonial writers mostly showed their concerns about the subaltern, poor and marginalized people or women. At a later stage, there was a shift in covering the life of Indian middle class and has by then taken the middle class, which has by then taken shape and were visible part of the population. Nevertheless, the post-colonial writings by and large discuss such poor and underdeveloped conditions due to the long period of colonial occupation and structures and legacy left behind by the colonial powers. So that's what I said, no, that it doesn't delink itself from the colonial period, because still the remembrance of the colonial period, the oppression of that time is alive in their minds, and its repercussion on the people in the post-colonial society is also very much present. So these writers at the beginning of the, now of course they are writing very different things. If you have read Arundhati Roy, just yesterday I read review of a new novel, which is completely different. So that is what has happened in the beginning. The legacy of and the structures of the colonial period continuously are present in those discourses. Ashcroft, for example, the writer Bill Ashcroft and many others have called it the assertion of the post-colonial people. What they call that the empire writes back, because we were the empire, how we say it, साम्राज्य, अंग्रेजों का साम्राज्य थे हम. We people were the colonial people of the empire of those people, and these people who are left behind are now writing back to the empire, telling them what all you did, and now they're challenging them and questioning them. From all what I've said so far, one can conclude that post-colonial writings is aimed at criticizing the European project of colonization during the last 500 years, because I take the colonization from 1492, that means 15th century. Of the last 500 years, since Europe declared itself, when Europe was all powerful, no, various countries of Europe were all powerful from 1915 onwards, almost till the end of the century. They were so powerful that they said that we are the center of the world. That's why we call the Eurocentrism, no? We are at the center of the world, and their ideas and understanding were supposed to be universal. So they thought that they have the universal reason, no? Enlightenment and reason and universal thought they had. And that's why everyone else has to just think according to them and write according to them, and I call imitate them and copy them, because they were the center and they had the universal vision, no, wisdom. So but post-colonialism or post-colonial writing, ultimately, I think that's what they are doing. They're trying to break this myth of the European universalism. Europe decided to be center of the earth and we became the periphery. I mean, what was the conclusion? That's what Advait Said is saying, no? That they are the center of the world, so we are periphery. Hum sab kinare mein, border mein rahenge. They are the self because they are the speaker, they are the subject, and we are the other. No, we have, I mean, Gayatri Spivak even has this article, can the subaltern speak? Because they say that if the subaltern can speak, then he is no more the subaltern, no, because the subaltern has no voice. The colonies have no voice. So they said that we are the self, you are the other, we are the center, you are the periphery, we are the metropolis, and you are the colony. We are developed, and the Europeans will say we are the developed, and you are underdeveloped. We are rich, and you are poor. And there's a new category. We are the North. Even if they are, I mean, they are at the south of the, I don't know, in the southern hemisphere, like Australia. But still, we are the North, and you are the South. So these binaries were created to continue to exert their domination even after they went away and keep showing to us that you are inferior. You are the people who have no knowledge and no history. As a student of Latin America and Spain, I have the possibility to tell you about the experiences of another post-colonial subject and countries, because Latin America has 23. I'm not talking about Brazil because Brazil speaks Portuguese. I'm speaking about the 23 Spanish-speaking countries. In the case of Salman Rushdie, I mentioned that his protagonist, Salim Sinai, had some sort of magical power. What was the magical power, if you remember? He could read other people's mind. No? So you remember that he enters the mind of his grandfather and he narrates us the experience of colonialism. In my opinion, Latin American writers also face the challenge of providing expression to an enormous variety of people who had been for centuries deprived of voice and written language. You know, the Latin America, the Emery Indians, the Indians who, the native population of the Americas didn't have the written script. So they completely, either they completely depended upon the cave art and, you know, and they had other ways of keeping the data, and or they completely depended upon the oral tradition. So variety of people, I mean, they were deprived. These Latin American writers took upon themselves after defeating, and don't forget that they were colonized in 1492. So their freedom struggle started in 1810 when we were being just colonized. So imagine there was a difference of many centuries between them and us, but they also thought that they needed to give voice to this variety of people who had been deprived of this voice and written language. Writers understood the power of literature, and therefore in 1960s, their literary production began to give voice to subaltern subjects that later proved to be the most important source of presenting the alternative view. So that means that a world over, there was an attempt to present some alternative to this European discourse, no, of universal truth, of enlightenment, of reason, that they were the only people who had reason and enlightenment, and they were the only people who could talk. So they could talk about themselves and they could talk about on our behalf as well. So this led to demand from hegemonic center. Once we started producing our literature and we started presenting an alternative voice, then we started also demanding from that hegemonic center, from that powerful center, the aesthetic freedom. Aesthetic freedom means freedom to write as we want to write, and question the European as to what is rationality, or what is beauty and aestheticism, or what is universality of European realism that had until then dominated. And we consider that magical realism, a literary style of, you must have read about magical realism or heard about magical realism, and this comes from, of course, there. So we consider magical realism a literary style of creation in which literatures from decolonial countries create another or alternative modes of expressing the subaltern voice and our reality. Magical realism as an artistic mode of expression and stylistic device is used to describe the alternative reality emerging from the so-called periphery. No, because center has its own everything, no, but the periphery has nothing. But we have also something, and we are wanting to say it in our own words. So the contemporary Indian literature in vernacular as well as in Indian English literature has witnessed application of magical realism, magical realist mode, both as craft and as a radical tool for innovative and experimental forms of writing. In this process, magical realist narratives challenge the literary realism dominated by the elements of realism which came from Europe. But don't forget that I mean, I'll tell you later. For example, I don't know whether you have read Uday Prakash, no? Hira Lal Ka Bhoot, Tirech, many other stories. Uday Prakash mainly writes stories in Hindi, and he has used this thing. But what has happened that he is using this magical realist style in order to, and he's writing now, I mean, he's writing for last 15, 20 years. So what he has done is he's using this magical realist style to point out the disappointment or disillusionment that we have with our own rulers. Because we know that in India, even after all the potential that we have, we still have a major chunk of population which is illiterate, we have poverty and all kinds of things. So he has used this thing to criticize our rulers. But in generally, the magical realist writing is to question the European narrative or the master narrative, as in the postmodern language people will say, the master narrative of the European, of Europe. But when did this European realism started making inroads in our literature? It's during the colonization, the European type of realism was imitated, and we forgot our narratives, the longer and shorter narratives, which we inherited from, for example, Panchatantra or from the epics, etc. No? So the genre of novel began to develop throughout the 19th century and the short story writing, where we hardly wrote short stories earlier, in the colonization. And Premchand, but however, Premchand is the one who breaks this, because although he has a realist narrative, but his characters change. Remember that earlier only landlords, Thakur, Thakurain, some Jamindar, or Raja, Maharani, these used to be the main characters. But what Premchand did, he brought the peasant, the downtrodden, Kafan and all, if you remember, the peasant, the downtrodden, the lower class people as the central figures of the narrative and agents of change. In other parts of India also the same thing was happening, and this way we had a collective of writing, which was the progressive phase of fiction writing in India. And this was the time that witnessed the resurgence of the novel as the main genre, following the social and political transformations that were taking place around us. So the realist writers challenged the feudal theme, Raja, Rani, Thakurain, Jamindar, and those romantic romances, etc. And they started writing about the common man. Writers use subtle humor, irony, satire, etc. to describe the lives of the villagers or the lower caste persons or women. Hence, once again, we can see that there has been a paradigm shift in the form of writing or the way we express our concerns. Magical realist modes of writing in Latin America and in India are the proof of this. We should remember, because don't forget that magical added to realism was something which was given by the Europeans to us. It was not our invention. We anyway call it Indian realism, but Europeans call it magical realism because all what we were writing at that time was kind of magical for them. So Garcia Marquez, you remember the 100 Years of Solitude of Garcia Marquez. He was a Nobel Prize winner and novelist from Colombia. He brought about the revolutionary change. He often mentioned that the amusing factor is that our reality resembles the wildest imagination of those who have not experienced this reality. So for Europeans, everything what we wrote was like the wild, the primitive or wild or unusual. And therefore, what seems to be magical imagery is actually our circumstantial reality, in particular in a time and space, in a particular time and space. We only have to glance around India and a specific cultural element will pop up before us. For example, we can see that we know hundreds of tales of ghosts and witches, no Chudail or Dain, ये सब की कहानियाँ, actual life में भी लोग इसका, people start believing it. We only have to glance around. We have hundreds of tales of ghosts and witches who are supposed to play a role in our daily life. The imagination of an Indian would not, in their daily life, separate from the ghosts residing in our some people ka ped or in Bargat ka ped in our courtyard. Or some witches will be roaming around to harm the one who has been cursed for some reason. There are even prescriptions on how to overcome all these ghostly creatures. And a true description of someone being cursed by the spirit or by an enemy or curse turning into reality may appear unreal to any rationalist European, but in India it would not be considered unrealistic. So our idiosyncratic sphere is something very different than what a European or any other perhaps country will take. But most of the post-colonial world, these kind of things happen. The idea that people cohabit alongside the marvelous or the magical realities looks quite unrealistic to the center of Europe. A story cannot separate these elements from the narrative situated in Indian reality. If there is an attempt to do so, then it will be distancing from what is very fundamental for us. We live in a country infused with the most mix of religions, cultural traditions, multiple ethnic groups, and rich topography. So all these things are taken together and they are presented or represented in our writings also. Magical realism does not make the narration strange or uncanny, as the Europeans say, no, that you have very strange writing, these are magical writings. Rather, it has a particular motive. To make space for questioning the hegemonic discourse of Europe or European realism that promotes singular or universal discourse only. Whereas the reality in our view is very diverse and plural. The reality in India is within India is plural. What to say about within other post-colonial world? Latin American reality is also different, but we are all under the or after the colonization. This kind of writing disrupts centralized discourse on the nature of reality and its representation. It also challenges the rationality and literary realism of European kind. In fact, the fictional world created by the writers includes characters for whom magical world is real and real world is magical. For example, in 100 Years of Solitude, I don't know if you have read, in 100 Years of Solitude, you will see that the colonel, there's a main character, is the Colonel Buendia. He takes his son to see the ice. When they reach there in a kind of a mela And when they reach there, they see the ice and they exclaim, "Oh, this is the biggest diamond I have ever seen." So this kind of, or there is a scene, an episode where there is use of um, magnet. And he takes the magnet to the chairs and the beds, and the chairs and beds start cracking, and the local people start, are very amazed and think that this is the magic. So what is real for us is magic for the Europeans, and what is magic for magic for them is not real for us, or whatever you want to say. So I wonder, therefore, how one can explain, and I'm going to narrate a very recent event. I mean, recent, perhaps you people are very small at that time, very young, in which you remember that at one point several years ago in India, we were Ganesh Murthy was being given milk to drink. Liters and liters of milk was given to Ganesh Murthy. People saw it as a sign of omen that, oh, Ganesh is drinking the milk brought by me, and mark of reverence across the country. Even the most intellectuals, most erudite people went and offered milk to Ganesha. Or for example, if a child is born with deformity in villages, for example, if a child is born with double head or something, then he is or she is considered a divine avatar of some god or goddess, and you will see there will be queue of people going there to pray that strange creature. So all these things are our reality. I mean, we are not making it up. It's our reality, and if you have to fictionalize them, if you are fictionalizing them, then imagine what will happen. That will sound, it will be perfectly all right for us because we will understand where it is coming from, but the Europeans find it, or the Americans will find it extremely strange. So our cultural practices privilege the use of myths and folktales and legends, rituals, popular beliefs, and wisdom, or popular wisdom, over the realist rationalist system of narration. These are the modes of writing that bring together a collective that sees these systems as their own circumstantial reality. The literatures of post-colonial countries reclaim the non-European mode in order to express their social and political reality. I mean, this is a reclaiming. We are reclaiming our space and our right to speak through presenting this magical realist mode. It must be noted that magical realist mode in India encourages mixing of local issues with the social problems. No? For example, the caste issue, or the female discrimination, etc. It highlights the problems of the marginal, the oppressed, as well as that of the middle and upper classes. In Arundhati Roy, for example, Gods of Small Things. But are crafted in the same alternate for giving an alternative mode of expression. If in early 20th century, there was a prevalence of the prefix post, and you know that there's so many things: post-colonial, post-modern, post-structural, etc. And now Dr. Pishkar has also talked about post-humanism, and we know about the post-truth. Then but the late 20th century, like our days, is marked by the frequent use of prefix trans. The words are prefixed by trans, translational, transnational, transcultural, transmodern. Once again, we witness another kind of paradigm shift that occurs due to a wider transformation in global governance and power. As compared to the period immediately after independence, when post-colonial studies preferred matter of nation and narration, I mean, we were more engaged with ourselves and how to write our stories. But in the present times of globalization, it has taken the nations, it has taken another turn, and nations apparently no longer form the backbone of international relations. कि the global village हो गया है ना, the whole world has become a global village. So there's the international relations का center is not the nation. We are urged to think instead across or beyond the tidy entities of nations and cultures. We have to look around transnationally, transculturally, if we hope to capture and critique the conditions of our contemporary times. In the same process of globalization, so you see the trans is used not, trans prefix is used to designate beyond, perhaps the beyond of something, beyond or across, for example. So in the same process of globalization, even the world or the planet Earth has acquired a different geography, which is not actual, which is not drawn by the line of the border, no, the frontiers, but conceptual geography. The geography of the world is understood through the broader context of globalization, because the term global north is used to designate developed countries. Likewise, the global south is used to is used for designating the developing countries or the poor countries or low income countries. I mean, the third world has now been taken over by this global south. And the global south we have invented. I mean, it has come down. It has come from our kind of societies. The examples of decolonial societies that I discussed in the earlier part of the novel are the now societies which are global south. I have deliberately placed before you a comparative reading of Indian and Latin American literatures. Both had two very different kind of colonial experiences, but after becoming independent, both had similar existence. The existence is what? Existence of underdevelopment. And the literature emerging from both the places not only raised similar problems and adopted similar mode of writing like the magical realist writing, but their narrative has become narrative of transculturation, which means that we people have same opinion and same worldview because we have lived similar past and going through similar present. So there is a narrative transculturation. We are looking at their culture and they are looking and taking from each other. So the global south is now having an epistemological exchange or epistemological dialogue because we are producing our knowledge and the global south from the other part of the world is producing their knowledge and we are exchanging these knowledges without going via the center. याद है पहले हम लोग सारा Foucault and Derrida, this whole postmodernist was completely, or subaltern studies was completely taken. The theorists from America or from Europe, but we were the receiver of those theories and we were of course deconstructing those theories to apply it to our reality. So therefore, reading them across or beyond your own cultures, nations, and even historical periods can reveal deeper meaning and develop us and develop not a single universal discourse, but a transversal discourse or pluriversal discourse. So the discourse is not universal. कि यूरोप ने कह दिया तो वही सत्य है. नहीं. We will come to the table to talk with our epistemology. Our people will bring their knowledge and the other will bring their knowledge and third will bring their knowledge and we will exchange our knowledges. So the whole exchange of epistemological exchange, cultural exchange will become transversal or pluriversal. So this is another paradigm shift. No? So you can see that the whole terms of dialogue, terms of हम कैसे बात करेंगे एक दूसरे से, this condition is changing. And thus going beyond, that means the prefix trans includes even those who were barbarous and as the nomenclature, but now have produced knowledges. Globalization once again is a Western or European and North American strategy to indirectly influence the countries of Global South or the former colonies by creating the so-called homogeneous culture and society. अब सारी दुनिया पिज्जा ही खाएगी, हम मैकडोनल्ड ही खोलेगी, एडिडास ही पहनेगी, नो सो देयर इज, हमको पता है ये सारा मार्केट का खेल है, सब अपना पुराना चीजें डंप करने के लिए they are doing this, but globalization once again is a kind of thing which is influencing our countries because they want to make the whole world homogenized, एक ही से society बना देंगे. However, the global south, like the post-colonial societies, have once again shown the resurgence of a critical discourse, reading the European norms very differently. They have opposed the plurality, the Europeans have opposed the plurality of opinion and respect for all the knowledges, whether emerging from the north or from the south. We are respecting all the knowledges, whether it comes from north or it comes from south. The global south is also establishing a transversal dialogue across cultures and suggests decolonizing our knowledge. That is very important, that knowledges should, the information which comes should be decolonized. The example of my parallel reading of Latin America and Indian literature shows this transversal contact. And once again, we are asserting ourselves by increasingly speaking and expressing ourselves in our language and our form. I mean, I'm not saying that we cannot use English. We use English, nevertheless, we speak about ourselves. No, it's not that we use English and then speak the way the English is spoke and told us how to speak. Therefore, as social, political, economic, and cultural changes will occur, the study of this phenomenon will also continue to grow. And then we will notice even more and more shifting of paradigms, because we know that we know that after all, only constant in our life is the change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, for this valuable session, such insightful session and effortless articulation of today's topic. We thank you a lot. Now, moving on, I request Dr. Riya Mukherjee once again to conduct the question and answer session. Dr. Mukherjee.
Thank you, Dr. Sadaf. Ma'am, we are waiting. Dear participants, please post your questions in the chat box. Till then, ma'am, I have a question. Of course, because of globalization, there has been an increased homogenization, we can say, of cultures. And also to a large extent, I do not know how much of literature, but of course of culture. But is there a way out? I mean, can we focus on the regional literatures, like in a country like India, where we have so many regional languages and of course the rich literatures of those languages? So if we focus on those literatures, can there be a way out of this homogenization? Because I mean, there always has been an allegation by post-colonial theorists that, you know, English has always got an unprecedented. So I mean, when we talk globally, English is something. English literatures are something that has always been focused upon too much. So can we like focus on the regional, dehomogenize, you can say, whatever, I mean, the forces of globalization?
No, I understand, because English is unfortunately becoming like the world language. No, even in India, if you take a survey, you will see that most of the people want to learn English because there is a domination. I mean, there is a market domination, this whole technological domination, which cannot be worked without English. But what I am insisting on is that that's what I'm critiquing, no? That the globalization has brought all these things because they have the market interest, because they have to sell their things and they want to make the society homogenized. But our global south, what we are, the global south is continuously trying to overcome this and critique this. Post-colonialism was a critique of the time of the modernity and the colonialism. No, the global south, writing in the global south, what we call today, is critiquing precisely the indirect domination of the same powers which came, I mean, Europe or now the USA is questioning that domination through our global south epistemological and other discourses. Now, regional literature, I mean, I have only talked about the regional literature. I've talked about the Spanish literature, which came. Spanish is one another very important, powerful language. 23 countries of the world speak Spanish, and all the literature which comes out of Spain is immediately translated into English, because it has such appeal all over the world. So we are also failing in our duty, in fact, to popularize our regional literature, translate immediately. For example, in Kerala, if you go, they translate everything into Malayalam. So today only I was reading a news item that a Kerala scooter driver has written behind Paulo Coelho, no? And inside he has the pictures of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. He's a scooter driver, but he reads because he gets this material in Malayali to read. Immediately, but we also should understand that mostly the industry of publication, there's a politics of translation also, and politics of publication. Only such things, exotic, whatever is exotic will be, and exotic for me is racist. It's a discriminating term, no? How am I exotic? Because we are, whatever. So even from Africa, the things which reach us are the things which is translated. So either we have to make that massive translation industry, and which will overpower the politics for publication which is coming from the global north, or what to say about the English translation? How many regional language texts are translated into our languages, into Hindi, or Hindi novels translated into Bengali, or Bengali translated into Malayali and all that. So this is a flaw which we have to somehow take into account and make effort to overcome it. Our Sahitya Academy and all this is not doing that kind of job, no? So it's your question is completely valid, but we cannot challenge the powers which are there to overcome this. The global south is making a lot of efforts now. All these kind of discourses which are coming out of the global south is something which is actually questioning why the postmodernism has just gone into some oblivion, no? Because it was not a convincing theory. It did not, it depended upon the same paradigms which were there, which the colonizers brought to us. Binaries, the periphery. They talked about the periphery and put us in. So these are the things which we should remember. I think that your time is up to 2 o'clock.
Yeah, ma'am, there is a question for Dr. Pishkar from Vibhash Ranjan. So Mr. Ranjan asks, where can we see the applied part of post-humanism? It's a question for Dr. Pishkar. Dr. Pishkar, are you there? Dr. Pishkar?
Yeah,
I think he's not there. So I think we'll move ahead with the next question. Ma'am, there's one question for you from Anupam Yadav, who asks, are we losing our cultural writing when we are globalized, or we increase and expand our thoughts of writing?
No, the thing is, it depends. We are, I mean, I did not touch upon the language question, which is a very major language question in the post-colonial discourse, not so much in the North-South discourses, but in the post-colonial discourse, you know, the African writers raised this issue a lot. When we write in English, and that's why I mentioned Gayatri Spivak's "Can the Subaltern Speak?" That article. If you read that article, you'll get a lot of clarity, because clarity in the sense that globalization is trying very hard to influence the societies, no, the urban middle class, for example. The urban middle, that's why I gave the example of pizzas and Pizza Hut and McDonald's, and you know, there's a kind of homogenization of culture. But are they able to, you see, look around, and are they able to penetrate in some substantial way? That's what I want to ask. Because and country like ours, you know, with a rich tradition and all, I'm not very conservative about, you know, our Mera Desh Mahan, etc. But we have some riches, no, and all the countries of the South have their riches. Latin America has its own culture and civilization. Europe has its own. I mean, from Europe only we got the sense of liberty, democracy, fraternity, and all these things. So these are the things. That's what I'm saying. That the question is not that we get influenced and we start appropriating the other cultures. The question is that what all are we transversally, how we are going to look at all the whole world and bring good from all the world and have an equal exchange of knowledge. That equality is not there, and that's why we feel under threat of being globalized, you know. But this is only in the urban culture. Go and see. I mean, mobile is not making us, and only 13% of Indian population speaks or knows English. So it's not that it's such a huge thing. In Latin America, no one speaks English, except the very erudite, no? Or if you go to in Africa, there's a Creole, no? There's a Creole in West Indies also. There's a Creolish thing. So it's not in Southeast Asia. You can see they don't speak English that way, no? Philippines, very few people you will see speaking English. So what I'm saying is that it is just a myth that we are being globalized. We are getting globalized.
There is another interesting question from Dr. Shamanaz in relation to this, like what we discussed right now. And she asks that, do you think that because of the popularity of Spanish literature, the popularity of native literature of Latin America is being overshadowed? So,
you say, unfortunately, Dr. Latin America had a very different pattern of colonization. No, they were in 1492. 1492 was still a very, I mean, the king and queen of Spain sent Columbus, in today's language you will say sponsored the expedition of Columbus to go to India, but he never reached India. He reached America, and when he realized that he has reached America, I mean, 15 years after he discovered, he realized that he had reached not India. That what was their manner of methodology or method of colonization? They went, plundered, looted, killed. You know, the 80% or 90% of native population in America was killed by the colonizers. So they were not called even colonizers, they were called the conquerors, the conquistadores. So the conquistadores went and they killed the local population, changed their religion, changed their language. Except few pockets in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Peru, in certain pockets of Latin America, most of them have forgotten there. They have no local Indian population, very few are there. So of course they are trying to resurrect. They are trying to resurrect their language, they are trying to resurrect their culture, the pre-Columbian culture, what they call. But it's not the popularity of Spanish, it's the popularity of the way of colonizing. They just killed everybody, and impose their language, their culture, their method, their thing on the Spanish population, on the Latin population. So there are pockets like in Quechua, Nahuatl. Quechua is one language, Nahuatl is another language where people are still writing and trying to rebuild it, rewrite it and rediscover it, because they had no writing, they didn't have the writing. So nothing is preserved. They have to reconstruct it.
Thank you, ma'am. Because of our paucity of time, we have already, we are 15 minutes past our time. So I think we'll end the question answer session here. And I hand over the charge to Dr. Siddiqui.
Thank you, Ria. Am I audible? Okay, all right. So now this brings us to the end, to the conclusion of this webinar. So I would request Dr. Ruchi Malviya, Assistant Professor, Department of English, SS Khanna Girls Degree College, to propose a vote of thanks. Ma'am.
Very good afternoon, everybody. George Bernard Shaw has said that progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So I think that this is a point where the concept of paradigm shift begins. So with this view that how literature changes, we just thought of introducing this subject. And today I am really privileged to extend my vote of thanks to dear academicians who are here with us. First of all, I would just like to share with you that how Professor Dr. Pishkar, he has just talked about the post-humanism and feminist theory. As we all know, as Sir has added, that post-humanism is a philosophical perspective of how change is indebted, how change is enacted in the world, whereas humanist perspective regards humans as autonomous. The post-humanist theory associates human with the environment or the whole ecological system. And so far as sexual and gender-based identity is concerned, it is an important aspect of humanism and post-humanism. So has very well talked about the theory of feminism and post-humanism. Now, Professor Vibha Maurya, ma'am, I really feel privileged to say words of thanks to you, because you have just expanded the whole theory of geography, that how the geographical expansion brought change in the world at large, how colonizers left the people in different areas of the world and they just left their memories, the memories of sorrow, the memories of suppression in the people who were colonized. But the point is that how the people who were colonized, how they just tried to rebuild their nation, how they just thought of to create a new world of their own. That is what all about the concept of post-colonial literature, which is based on all those memories of colonized past. I really feel indebted to all my dear colleagues who have been here with us to participate in this program. I would like to say thanks to our dear principal ma'am, who has always been a strong support for us in any academic activity. Whenever we want, she is always there to help us, to support us. I would like to say thanks to all the faculty members, the participants, the students who are here with us in this academic event. And last but not the least, I would like to say thanks to our technical team, which has been, especially, I would like to say thanks to Dr. Nishi, who has been associating all these technical issues. She was always there all the time with us in this program. And finally, I would say thanks to our dear student, Sadia Siddiqui. She has been a student of BA Part 3, and she has also helped us in conducting this program so well. Thanks a lot once again to everybody who is present in this program. Now, Sadaf ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So this brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a great day and we'll meet soon again. So we are ending this meeting.
Bye, everybody.